The alarm clock blared in the early morning, shattering the silence of the tiny room. Lila hurriedly reached out to turn it off, afraid the noise would wake Leo. She lay there for a few seconds, eyes wide open, staring at the stained ceiling, marked by the passage of time. Her body ached from the exhaustion of the previous day, but she had no choice but to get up and start another day. The room was barely 10 square meters, containing a small bed pushed against the wall, an old faded table, and a simple wardrobe with a few worn-out clothes. Cold winds seeped through the broken window hinges, sending an icy chill into the already poorly heated space. Lila shivered, pulling her old coat tighter around her as she stepped out of bed and carefully adjusted the thin blanket over Leo. He was only 5 years old, but compared to other children his age, Leo looked smaller. His innocent face, framed by long eyelashes, twitched slightly with each breath, and his tiny arms clung tightly to a tattered stuffed bear. Lila bent down to place a gentle kiss on his forehead, her heart aching at the thought of all the hardships he had to endure. She took a deep breath, reminding herself she could not afford to break down. Moving toward the tiny kitchen corner, which was barely big enough to hold a small electric stove and a few old pots, she quietly prepared breakfast. A slice of cold bread and a bit of butter. That was all she could offer Leo this morning. Occasionally, if she was lucky, she could buy some discounted eggs or milk from the store nearby. But with her meager salary as a cleaner, every penny had to be carefully accounted for. When breakfast was ready, she turned back to wake Leo. "Leo, wake up, sweetheart," she whispered, gently shaking the little boy. Leo blinked a few times, then let out a big yawn before opening his eyes to look at his mother. He smiled and wrapped his small arms around her neck. "Good morning, Mommy." Lila felt a warmth spread through her heart. Leo's smile was the only thing that kept her going, despite the exhaustion of life. He rubbed his eyes and then sat up in bed. "Mommy, do you have to go to work today?" "Of course, sweetheart. But I'll pick you up after my shift and we'll go home together, okay?" Leo nodded obediently. Despite his young age, he was very understanding. He never complained or asked for anything extravagant because he knew how hard his mother worked to provide for him. After helping Leo get dressed, Lila quickly put on her faded blue cleaner's uniform, the same one she had received when she started working at Sterling Financial Group. The fabric had worn thin over time, and the loose-fitting pants were far from stylish, but they were the best she had. She tied her brown hair into a low bun and glanced at the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Her face was pale from lack of sleep, dark circles under her eyes betraying her fatigue, yet her gaze remained determined. She had no time for makeup or concerns about her appearance. For Lila, the only thing that mattered was keeping her job. Her life was far from easy, but she had no choice but to keep pushing forward. As Lila led Leo out of their rundown apartment, the sky was still a dim shade of gray. The bitter cold made them both shiver. The streets of New York remained quiet, with only a few flickering streetlights casting reflections on the damp pavement. Lila held her son's hand tightly and walked quickly toward the bus stop. She was already running late, and today was an important day. If she arrived late, her manager could reprimand her, or worse, she could lose her job. But there was another problem weighing even more heavily on her mind. Today, the daycare Leo usually attended had announced it would be closed due to plumbing issues. She had called a few friends for help, but no one was available. She couldn't leave Leo home alone, and she certainly couldn't afford a babysitter. Lila bit her lip, torn with hesitation. She had only one option left. She would have to bring Leo to work with her. The fateful encounter. The sun had just risen above the towering buildings of New York, casting a soft golden hue over the bustling streets. Lila held Leo's hand tightly as the two hurried toward the bus stop, blending into the rush of the morning crowd. A sense of unease crept into her heart. Children weren't allowed in a strict workplace like Sterling Enterprises, but Lila had no other choice. She didn't dare to think about the consequences if her superiors discovered that she had brought her son to work. When they arrived at Sterling Financial Group, Lila pulled her hood up, trying to hide the anxiety on her face. She carefully led Leo inside through the employee entrance, whispering instructions to him. "Leo, you have to be on your best behavior. No running around, no making noise, okay?" Leo obediently nodded, his wide, curious eyes taking in the surroundings. It was his first time stepping into such a luxurious and dazzling place. The gleaming walls, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and polished marble floors reflected their images as they walked. "This place looks just like the castles in the fairy tales you tell me, Mommy," Leo whispered in awe. Lila gave a small smile, but deep inside she was filled with worry. She couldn't afford any trouble. If anyone found out she had brought her son here, she could lose her job. After making sure the coast was clear, she led Leo into a small break room for employees, guiding him to a quiet corner. "Stay here and play, okay? Mommy will finish work soon, and then we'll go home." Leo nodded obediently. He picked up his small toy car and sat quietly. Lila grabbed a mop and hurried off to start her work. But fate had no intention of giving her a peaceful day. It wasn't long before Leo, an inherently curious and energetic child, began to grow bored. He peeked through the crack of the door, watching as neatly dressed employees bustled back and forth outside. He wanted to explore this dazzling world. Ignoring his mother's warning, Leo gently pushed the door open and tiptoed into the hallway. Everyone was too busy to notice the small boy in his simple clothes. Leo glanced around before his curiosity led him toward the end of the corridor, where a grand door stood, leading to the office of the company's president, David Sterling. Just as he reached it, the door swung open. A tall man in an expensive black suit stepped out. His chiseled face was serious, his deep blue eyes cold and commanding. David Sterling. Distracted, Leo crashed straight into the man's legs. "Ouch!" The boy stumbled and fell onto the marble floor. David instinctively crouched down. A strange sensation shot through him the moment his gaze met the child's face. Those eyes. The exact same shade of blue as his own. Leo blinked up at him before suddenly breaking into a bright, joyful smile. "Daddy!" the boy exclaimed and threw his arms around David's leg. The entire hallway fell into stunned silence. Every nearby employee froze in shock. No one dared to even breathe as they watched their cold, untouchable CEO being hugged by a child who had just called him Daddy. David stood motionless, his heart skipping a beat. Who was this boy? Why did he call him Daddy? And why did he look so much like him? The hurried, frantic footsteps echoed against the marble floor, blending with the chaotic pounding in Lila's chest. She ran like mad, nearly stumbling as she rushed through the grand hallway of Sterling Financial Group. Oh God, the sight before her made her entire body freeze. Leo, her son, was clinging tightly to a man's leg. But not just any man. David Sterling, the president of the corporation, the most powerful man in this building. The world seemed to spin around her, terror surging through her veins. How did this happen? Her mind went blank. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. She lunged forward, almost yanking Leo away from David. "Leo!" Her voice, usually composed, cracked with pure alarm. The little boy looked up at her, blinking his striking blue eyes identical to the man standing before her. But Lila didn't dare to dwell on that. She bowed repeatedly, gripping Leo's shoulders tightly, as if shielding him from whatever danger lay ahead. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. My son is just a child. He doesn't know any better." She was frantic, overwhelmed, cold sweat forming on her forehead. What if he was angry? What if David Sterling was furious? She could lose her job in an instant. This job was everything to her, the only thing allowing her to care for Leo and her ailing adoptive mother. But David wasn't listening. He wasn't hearing a single word she said. His sharp, piercing gaze, the same gaze that commanded fear in the business world, was now filled with something else entirely. Shock. The icy distance he always maintained, gone. Instead, his eyes held something deeper, a raw, overwhelming emotion, a pain so deep it felt unbearable. His lips trembled, his entire body stiffened as if struck by lightning. This feeling. No. It's impossible. His voice came out hoarse, disbelief laced in every syllable. "Elise!" Lila froze. Elise? She didn't understand. Who is Elise? Before she could react, David moved. No hesitation, no second thoughts. He pulled her into his arms, strong, unyielding, as if he would never let go again. His breath was shaky, his heart thundered. Lila was completely paralyzed. His warmth enveloped her, so close she could feel his wild, erratic heartbeat. He was trembling. This man, so powerful, so cold, was trembling as he held her, as if he had just found the most important thing he had ever lost. His voice broke, thick with raw emotion, as if he feared that if he let go, she would disappear again. Thank you. Thank you for coming back to me, my wife. Sincere, devastating, heart-wrenching. The air in the hallway felt frozen in that moment. The surrounding employees barely dared to breathe, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had never seen their president like this. David Sterling, the man known as the ice machine of the financial world, was always in control. He never let emotions interfere with his work. He was a symbol of strength and decisiveness. A man who, with just a single look in a boardroom, could make even the most seasoned investors tread carefully. A man who, after losing his wife, had grown even more distant, colder than ever before. Since that fateful night, David had never shown any emotion other than sheer indifference. But today, the moment he saw this woman, his entire world shattered. Elise! Her name escaped his lips like a whisper, raw, trembling with emotion. His eyes widened in disbelief, as if reality itself had slipped through his fingers. No one could have imagined that the ruthless businessman, the same man who had crushed countless competitors with a single calculated decision, was now standing there, shaking, vulnerable, before a woman. He didn't care about the stares. He didn't care about the employees frozen in shock. He only saw her, as if his entire world had just returned after 5 years of unbearable loss. But Lila was paralyzed. Her throat was dry, her heartbeat erratic, hammering against her ribs. The man in front of her, who was he? Why was he looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his life? Why did his voice tremble when he said that name? She wasn't Elise. She didn't know this man. Or at least, she thought she didn't. But then why, when she looked into his eyes, did an inexplicable pain stir within her? Why, when she heard the name Elise, did her head throb, like something buried deep inside was trying to surface? She shook her head, forcing away the chaos in her mind. No, I'm Lila. She couldn't be whoever he thought she was. And yet, why couldn't she look away from him? Panic surged through her veins. She jolted, suddenly aware of how close he was, and shoved him away. Her hands trembled. You need to respect yourself, Mr. Sterling, she stammered, her voice unsteady. You've got the wrong person. I'm Lila. I'm just a cleaning staff member. David froze, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers. A deep, raw confusion flickered in his gaze. He couldn't believe it. His hands still gripped her small shoulders, as if trying to find something familiar. This isn't possible. She's Elise. There was no mistake. This face, these eyes, that voice, everything was her. Was she testing him? Was she angry at him? Blaming him? David swallowed hard, his voice lowering into something rough, almost broken. You're testing me, aren't you, Elise? Lila shivered. She didn't understand what he was saying. All she knew was that she was in danger. She needed to get away. Her pulse pounded. A rising fear clawed at her chest. She clutched Leo's hand tightly, her voice barely holding together. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I don't know you. I'm just a janitor. Please, let me go. She bowed deeply, then turned and ran. David stood frozen. He watched as her figure disappeared at the end of the hallway, and an unbearable emptiness settled in his chest. He had just found her, the woman he had spent the last 5 years searching for. And yet, she was slipping away from him once again. A sharp pain clenched at his heart, making it impossible to breathe. Why are you denying me, Elise? Do you really not remember me? His fist tightened, his blue eyes darkened, swirling with an intensity as deep as an endless abyss. He would not let her leave him again. Pukal. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like and follow, means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a "I am happy" in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter together. The past returns. David stood silently in his office, gazing out at the vast skyline of New York, bathed in golden hues of the setting sun. But the breathtaking view did nothing to ease the storm within him. All he could see, all he could feel, were the ghosts of his past. Elise. Her name was a curse carved deep into his heart, haunting him for 5 relentless years. The woman who had just run away from him, Lila or Elise, had reignited memories he had long thought buried. Her eyes, her face. How could he ever forget? 5 years ago. David remembered that day vividly, the day his entire world collapsed. Back then, they had been a happy couple, hand in hand as they stepped into what was supposed to be a dream getaway on a paradise island. Elise, his woman, his everything, was as breathtaking as an angel under the golden sun. Her fair skin glowed softly, her deep blue eyes as endless as the ocean. They had laughed together on the beach, walked beneath the moonlit sky, sipped on cool cocktails, and lost themselves in the serenity of their love. David could still recall how Elise would rest her head on his shoulder as the sun set, how she would watch him quietly, her gaze full of warmth and devotion. Back then, he had believed, with absolute certainty, that as long as she was by his side, nothing else in the world mattered. They had dreamed of a future together, a home filled with warmth, children running through the garden, their laughter filling the air. But all of it, everything, shattered in a single fateful night. That stormy night. Their voyage back to the mainland had begun in perfect tranquility. The sea was calm. The deck lights glowed brightly. Passengers lounged under the starry sky, sipping wine, enjoying the peaceful night. Elise leaned against the railing, her soft hair dancing in the salty breeze. "Are you sure you'll love me forever?" she suddenly asked, a playful glint in her eyes. David chuckled, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his lips brushing against her ear as he whispered, "You are my entire world, Elise." But before that promise could be sealed into eternity, their paradise turned into a nightmare. Midnight. A violent storm struck without warning. Raging waves slammed against the ship's hull. The wind howled like a beast unleashed. Sirens blared across the vessel. David was jolted awake by the screams of terrified passengers. He shot out of bed, heart pounding in his chest. "Elise! Where is Elise?" He sprinted down the swaying corridor, the ship lurching beneath his feet, fear clawing its way into his soul. "Elise! Elise!" he roared, his voice swallowed by the howling storm. And then he saw her. She stood at the bow, her wide, terrified eyes locking onto his. A monstrous wave rose behind her, towering like a dark wall of death. The ship buckled violently. Her body was hurled over the railing. "Elise!" David lunged forward. His fingers brushed against hers. For the briefest, most agonizing moment, he felt her warmth. And then, she was gone. Swallowed by the abyss of the sea, the entire world collapsed before his eyes. David screamed, trying to leap after her. But the crew held him back. The waves were merciless, the currents too strong. Everyone said the same thing. No one could survive falling into those treacherous waters. But David refused to believe it. It wasn't possible. She couldn't be dead. He had shouted, fought, struggled against the men restraining him. But it was useless. The shipwreck had claimed many lives. And Elise, her name became just another on the list of the missing. For weeks they searched, until the authorities declared there was no hope. People told him to accept the truth, to move on, that she was gone. But David never believed them. How could he? The woman he loved, the wife he had sworn to protect, had vanished before his very eyes. Every night the same nightmare haunted him, her fingers slipping from his grasp, her terrified eyes locked on his one last time. And then, she was gone. From that day forward, David Sterling lived in hell. He hired the best divers, the most experienced rescue teams, scouring every inch of the ocean floor. He chased every lead, searching every island, every fishing village, every coastal town, every hospital near the site of the accident. Every single day he waited for a miracle, but no one had seen her. No trace of her existed, as if she had never been real. Every time there was news of a missing woman, a shipwreck survivor, or an amnesiac found washed ashore, David would drop everything and rush to the scene. Red-eye flights, sleepless nights, endless searches, all for the desperate hope of seeing Elise again. But time after time, he was met with bitter disappointment. He had seen women with hair like hers, a figure like hers, even eyes like hers, but none of them were her. The repeated blows of shattered hope dragged him into a bottomless abyss. Every time a flicker of hope emerged, it was crushed mercilessly. He had asked himself more times than he could count, was she really dead? But his heart refused to accept it. He couldn't live believing that Elise had left this world forever. He wouldn't let her go. David couldn't love anyone else. After losing Elise, he rejected every woman who tried to get close to him. No matter how many beautiful women surrounded him, no matter how much the media speculated about his love life, his heart never wavered, because it had died with Elise that fateful night. No one could replace her. No one. He couldn't forget her. He didn't want to forget her. Every night she haunted his dreams. In them, Elise stood there smiling at him, her hand reaching out, as if she was waiting for him to take it. But every time he tried to touch her, she would fade, dissolving into nothing but mist. He would scream her name, chase after her, only to wake up to the suffocating darkness of his empty room. Had he really lost her forever? The nightmares never stopped, day after day, a month after month, a relentless torment, a life sentence with no end. David threw himself into work, tearing through the business world like a wounded beast. He became sharper, colder, merciless. The media called him the heartless machine. They said he had become ruthless after his wife's death. They said he no longer believed in love. But the truth was, he was just trying to survive. Work was the only thing keeping him from losing his mind. If he stopped for even a second, memories of Elise would drown him. So he locked his heart away. He buried his pain. He hid his loneliness. But on those long, cold nights when the lights in his office had dimmed, he would still sit there, staring at the wedding ring he had never once taken off. For 5 years, he had lived in hell, and he knew he would remain there until he found her. After 5 years of agony, after thousands of days of searching in vain, after countless times his heart had been shattered by hope, only to be crushed by disappointment. Finally, today, he saw her, standing before him, flesh and blood. Not another look-alike, not a dream, not a hallucination born from his unrelenting obsession. It was her, his Elise. She was a little older, her skin slightly weathered, her face more worn than before. But it was her. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. Every emotion he had suppressed for 5 long years exploded at once. Relief, shock, pain, joy, doubt. They clashed violently inside him, making his entire body tremble. He couldn't believe his eyes. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but he had never expected to find her here, of all places, inside his company. And he had never thought that when he finally saw her again, he wouldn't be able to breathe. "I found you, Elise. I finally found you." Every cell in his body screamed those words. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts, no doubt. He rushed forward and pulled her into his arms. He had expected her to hug him back, to whisper how much she missed him, to ask why he hadn't found her sooner. But she went rigid, she struggled. And then, a sharp shove to his chest. The force made him step back. The warmth of her body barely had time to sink in before the icy sting of rejection pierced his heart like a blade. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, distant, like she truly believed they had never met before. "No." David felt an invisible hand squeeze around his heart. Elise was looking at him with wariness, with distance, no recognition, no warmth, not even a flicker of emotion. David clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. She really didn't remember him? Or Was she testing him? He had already lost her once. That time, he had let the ocean take her. Let her slip from his grasp for 5 agonizing years. He had lost everything, and now that he had finally found her again, she didn't remember him. She looked at him like a stranger. Why? Why had she forgotten him? The pain inside him burned like an unquenchable fire, searing through his soul. Number. He would not accept this. He would not lose her again. This time, no matter what it took, he would bring her back. Investigating Lila's identity. David sat in his vast office, the golden light from the lamps reflecting off the expensive mahogany desk. But inside him, a storm raged, far more violent than the one from that fateful night. Elise. She wasn't dead. There was no mistake. The woman he had held in his arms after 5 years of believing she was lost. She could deny it. She could say she didn't know him. But her eyes couldn't lie. So why was she living under the name Lila? Why didn't she remember him? Where had she been all these years? And most importantly, that child, Leo, a boy with his exact blue eyes. A storm of suspicion ignited within David, growing stronger by the second. He couldn't just sit and do nothing. Without hesitation, he picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. Within seconds, a steady voice answered from the other end. Chairman Sterling, who do you need me to investigate? Liam Carter, head of Sterling Enterprises Security Division, a former FBI investigator, one of the best. David didn't hesitate. Lila, the new janitor at the company. I want everything on her, where she lives, where she's worked, and every detail about her past. There was a brief pause. A janitor? Why would the chairman personally request an investigation on someone so insignificant? But Liam knew better than to ask questions. I'll have the information as soon as possible. David hung up, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. A truth was waiting to be uncovered. 24 hours later. Liam stepped into David's office, a thick file in his hands. He placed it on the desk, his voice unusually serious. Chairman, there are some odd things about this woman. David flipped open the file, his eyes scanning the details rapidly. Name, Lila Evans. Status, single mother, has a 4-year-old son, Leo Evans. Recently moved to New York 2 months ago with her ailing adoptive mother. Current occupation, janitor at Sterling Enterprises, hired 2 months ago. No formal education, no stable work history. Before moving to New York, she lived in a small fishing village on the southern coast. David's brows knitted together. A fishing village? Why would a young, beautiful woman, one who looked exactly like Elise, not have a clear past? His gaze shifted to the next page. Her listed address. A rundown apartment in the outskirts of the city. Attached was a surveillance photo. A frail-looking woman in a worn-out coat, clutching the hand of a tiny boy. Lila or Elise? David felt a sharp ache in his chest. How had she survived all these years? What kind of life had she been forced to live? Without hesitation, that very night, David drove to Lila's listed address. He couldn't wait. The apartment complex was old and worn down. Peeling walls, narrow, dimly lit concrete staircases. David had never imagined that the woman he loved had been living in conditions like this. Standing before the battered wooden door, he took a deep breath and knocked. Knock, knock, knock. No response. He knocked again, harder this time. Knock, knock, knock. Still, silence. David frowned, pressing his ear against the door. A faint rustling noise, like someone moving inside. Someone was there. He knocked once more, this time his voice steady but firm. I don't mean to intrude. I just want to talk. Nothing. David waited, then spoke again. I'm David Sterling, chairman of the company where Lila works. The moment those words left his lips, a small noise from inside. The door remained shut, but a frail voice finally answered from within. With the chairman? What are you doing here? David blinked. The voice was elderly, wary, yet tinged with unease. He softened his tone. I just want to know about her. I don't mean any harm. A long silence. Then, click. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with silver white hair and cloudy eyes that still held a sharp edge of caution. She studied him carefully, scanning him from head to toe, as if assessing whether he was a threat. David met her gaze, unwavering but unaggressive. Finally, the woman sighed and stepped aside. Come in. David stepped inside, his heart heavy with unanswered questions. David sat on an old chair in the tiny living room. The space was cramped and silent, save for the howling wind slipping through the cracks of the worn-out window. He glanced around. This place, it was too simple, too empty. His chest tightened as he imagined what she must have gone through. An elderly woman emerged from the small kitchen, her frail hands trembling as she set a cup of hot tea before him. He wasn't sure if the trembling came from age or from the weight of the past resurfacing. She settled into the seat across from him, her deep-set eyes filled with unspoken truths. I'm not Lila's biological mother. Her voice was hoarse and slow. I'm the one who saved her. The fateful night, the woman who washed ashore. David's entire body stiffened. He had already suspected the truth, but hearing it spoken aloud sent a numbing shock through his veins. She had been saved. She had survived. The old woman took a deep breath, her gaze growing distant, lost in memories. About 5 years ago, on a stormy night, I found her washed up on the shore near the village. David clenched his fists, his sharp gaze absorbing every word. She was ice cold, completely drained. Her body was covered in wounds. There was a deep gash on her forehead. The blood had dried, but the bruising was still severe. She was wearing a white dress, torn to shreds, barely hanging on to life. A vivid image formed in David's mind. Elise, lying motionless on the shore, battered by the storm, alone, surrounded by nothing but darkness, the relentless sea, and unbearable solitude. His heart twisted painfully. He had left her to suffer this. The old woman continued, I thought she was dead at first, but when I placed my hand on her neck, I felt it. A heartbeat, weak, but still there. David's throat tightened. I brought her home, took care of her every day, but when she finally woke up, she paused, looking at him with sympathy. She didn't remember anything. David gripped the cup of tea, the heat searing his fingertips, but it was nothing compared to the fire burning inside his chest. She doesn't remember anything? The elderly woman slowly nodded. She didn't know who she was or where she came from. When she woke up, she was so terrified that she curled up in the corner, her eyes filled with panic. She couldn't even recall her own name or what had happened to her. When I handed her a mirror, she burst into tears, because even her own reflection felt foreign to her. She paused, her voice heavy. Sometimes she would get headaches, severe ones. Occasionally she'd recall faint glimpses of the past, but never anything clear. David felt as if a hand had wrapped around his heart and squeezed. He shut his eyes, trying to contain the unbearable pain spreading through his entire being. His Elise, the strong, radiant woman who once shone like the sun, had been trapped in darkness and fear for the past 5 years. The old woman sighed, her voice dipping lower. A little over a month later, I discovered she was pregnant. David froze, his head snapped up, his blue eyes wide in shock. What did you say? Elise was pregnant? The woman gave a slow, firm nod. She didn't know at first. She was always exhausted, dizzy, but we assumed it was from her injuries. It wasn't until I took her to the doctor that we learned the truth. David sat in stunned silence. He didn't know how to process the tidal wave of emotions crashing over him. Relief, shock, anguish, overwhelming joy. 5 years ago, he had lost his wife, but he never knew that he had also lost the chance to be there for his son from the very first moment of his life. Leo was his child. His son had been born while Elise had no memory of him. His son had grown up without him. David felt his heart being torn apart. The buried truth and David's decision. The old woman sighed again, her frail hand resting on the now cool cup of tea. I gave her the name Lila. I took care of her like she was my own daughter. We lived simply in the fishing village. Every day she worked tirelessly, doing whatever job she could find to provide for the child growing inside her. David's entire body trembled. Elise had gone through everything alone, no one beside her, no one to hold her, to comfort her, to share in the burden. She had endured pregnancy, childbirth, and motherhood, all while struggling to survive, and all while not knowing that she had a husband who would have given anything to be by her side. The old woman looked at him, her eyes now filled with a different kind of sharpness. "Who are you, really?" David took a deep breath. His gaze was unwavering, filled with an unshakable resolve. His fists clenched at his sides as he met her eyes and spoke the undeniable truth. "I am her husband. I am the father of the child she gave birth to." His voice was steady. There was no hesitation, no doubt. The old woman's hands trembled. You're serious?" David nodded, his every word carrying 5 years' worth of pain and unwavering determination. "Lila is my wife. Her real name is Elise. And Leo is my son." He told her everything. The accident, Elise's disappearance, the years of searching. The old woman listened, her expression shifting from shock to sorrow. David's voice was unwavering as he finished. "Whether she remembers me or not, whether she accepts me or not, I will bring her back. I lost her once." His jaw tightened. "This time I will never let it happen again." 6. Reclaiming memories. After that tense encounter, Lila did everything she could to avoid David. Whenever she caught sight of him in the company, she would immediately lower her head, hurriedly slipping into the nearest hiding spot or making a quick exit. She was afraid. Not because he seemed dangerous, not because he had threatened her in any way, but because his gaze was too intense, too full of emotions she didn't understand. She couldn't bear to face the agony in his eyes. Nor could she explain why she looked so much like his wife. But David wasn't one to give up. One evening, after she finished her late shift and stepped out of the company, his tall figure was already waiting for her. Lila froze, instinctively turning to leave, but his deep, steady voice stopped her in her tracks. "Elise, stop running from me." She stiffened but didn't turn around. He took a step closer, his voice thick with pain. "Do you have any idea how long I've searched for you? For 5 years I never stopped. Not a single day passed without me thinking of you." Lila clenched her fists. A strange ache pulsed in her chest. But she bit her lip, shaking her head. "You're mistaken. I'm not Elise." David inhaled deeply, trying to stay calm. "Do you really believe that?" Lila's lips trembled. She didn't know. She truly remembered nothing. But then why did it hurt so much to look at him? David took another step forward, but he didn't pressure her. "Just give me a chance." For the first time, she truly looked at him. Really looked into his eyes. There was no forcefulness, no anger, only pain, longing, and sincerity. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, after a moment of hesitation, Lila gave a small nod. "Fine, I'll listen. But just this once." A faint smile crossed David's lips. For the first time in 5 years, hope flickered in his eyes. David took Lila to his mansion, the very home they had once shared. As the car pulled up in front of the grand iron gates, she shivered slightly, instinctively clutching her sleeve. She was wary. Yet at the same time, an odd feeling stirred within her. For some reason, this place didn't feel as unfamiliar as she had expected. The mansion stood under the warm glow of golden lights, nothing like the cold, lifeless house she imagined a billionaire CEO would live in. Stepping inside, her eyes swept over the interior. The walls, the furniture, the faint scent in the air. Why does everything feel so familiar? Had she really been here before? David led her into his study, where a large wooden box sat atop the desk. He opened it, pulling out a stack of old photographs. The first photo, a woman in a white dress, sitting under a tree in the garden, her smile radiant. The second photo, a candlelit dinner. David holding her hand, his gaze full of love. The third photo, the two of them in a European city, her lips curled in a soft smile as she rested her head on his shoulder. The fourth photo. The woman standing on a beach, her dress billowing in the wind, looking at him with eyes filled with warmth. The fifth photo, a wedding picture. Lila's grip on the photos tightened. The woman in the images. She looked just like her, elegant, beautiful, glowing with happiness. But what truly caught her attention was the necklace in almost every photo. She knew that necklace. She had kept it in a small drawer at home for as long as she could remember. But how was that possible? Why was something she had always owned appearing in pictures with him? Her heart pounded. She looked up at David, her voice unsteady. "This necklace?" David smiled gently, picking up the photograph. "It was the first birthday gift I ever gave you. You once told me it was your most precious possession. You never took it off." Lila bit her lip, her heartbeat erratic. "I don't remember." But deep inside, something was shifting. For the first time, a small part of her started to believe that David wasn't lying, that somehow, some way, they did share a past. Even if she couldn't recall it, the truth was beginning to unfold right before her eyes. David gazed at her, his expression gentle yet unwavering. "It's okay, Elise. There's no rush. We'll take this journey together. I'll help you remember everything." She no longer ran away. She was still afraid, still unsure. But now, she was ready to uncover the truth. Reclaiming the past. After seeing the cramped, run-down apartment where Lila and her adoptive mother lived, David couldn't stay still any longer. He would not allow his wife and child, nor the woman who had saved Elise's life, to continue living like that. One evening, he went to meet Lila. She had just finished her shift and stood outside the apartment, the cold night breeze making her shiver slightly. David approached, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Move into our home," he said. "You, Leo, and your mother." Lila's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with defiance. "No, I can't do that." "Why not?" David's voice was calm, firm. "It's your home." Lila clenched her fists. She didn't want to owe him anything. She didn't want to be tied to him, no matter how much she was starting to believe his words. But underneath his determination, she saw something else in his eyes. Sincerity, pain. He wasn't offering out of pity. He truly believed she was Elise, his wife. Lila bit her lip, ready to refuse again. But then, a small voice interrupted them. "Mama, can I really stay with Daddy?" Leo ran over, eyes wide and filled with excitement. Lila froze. Her son had never had a father. Didn't he deserve a complete family? She exhaled shakily. Then slowly, she nodded. "Fine, but I'm not staying there forever." David's lips curled into a soft smile, hope flickering in his eyes. "I don't need forever," he murmured. "I just need you to try to believe in me." Leo's excitement for his new home. The moment they arrived at the mansion, Leo's excitement was impossible to contain. "Mama, this house is huge!" He ran ahead, eyes darting around in wonder. "Can I have my own room? Can I get a puppy?" David scooped him up effortlessly, smiling warmly. "Of course, son." Lila stood nearby, watching them. Her chest tightened. She had never seen Leo this happy before. He needed a father. And David, he truly seemed to love their son. The first days in the mansion. At first, Lila remembered nothing. The house felt familiar, yet every memory was buried beneath an impenetrable fog. Whenever she tried to recall the past, a sharp pain would stab through her skull, as if something inside her was actively resisting the truth. David, however, never lost patience. He began telling her stories. He told her about their love, about the beautiful, real life they had once shared. He told her about their first meeting, how she had accidentally spilled coffee all over his expensive suit. He told her about the moment he knew he loved her, when she had smiled at him under the golden light of sunset. He told her about the nights she used to rest her head on his shoulder, reading a book, while he simply sat there watching her. Lila didn't remember, but she listened, and for the first time, she didn't push him away. Awakened memories. David didn't just tell stories. He started doing the things he used to do. the things that had once made Elise fall in love with him. He cooked. One evening, he stepped into the kitchen and prepared her favorite dish, a simple pasta with creamy mushroom sauce. When he placed the plate in front of her, Lila hesitated, momentarily caught off guard. She didn't remember. But when she took the first bite, something inside her stirred. A feeling, a whisper of familiarity. He took her to the garden, the place she had once loved the most. For the first time in weeks, Lila smiled as she admired the blooming flowers. David didn't say anything. He simply stood beside her, letting her soak in the space that had once been hers. He brought her to the cafe where they first met. "Do you remember this place?" Lila slowly looked around. It felt familiar, yet distant. She shook her head. David didn't look disappointed. He knew that it might take a month, a year, maybe even longer. But however long it took, he would wait. Instead, he placed a cup of coffee in front of her. "This was your favorite." Lila wrapped her hands around the warm cup, bringing it to her lips. The taste, a dull ache bloomed in her chest, not because it was special, but because something inside her had just awakened. Fragments of the past. Days passed, and slowly, pieces of memory started slipping through the cracks. She remembered the warmth of a large hand enclosing hers. She remembered the sound of deep, quiet laughter whenever she said something silly. She remembered the way his gaze softened when he looked at her in the morning as she woke up. The memories were faint, scattered. But they were no longer an empty void. Leo's joy. Through it all, Leo was the happiest. He clung to David's side constantly, as if they had known each other forever. "Daddy, I want to play soccer today." David chuckled, effortlessly lifting him into his arms. "All right, let's play together." Lila watched from a distance as David and Leo played in the garden, the boys' laughter ringing through the air. Her heart softened. Leo was too happy. This was the family he had always dreamed of having. David had never imagined himself as a father. He had lost the chance to be there for his son's first cry, his first steps, his first words. But now, his son stood before him, staring up with wide, innocent eyes. His eyes. At first, Leo had been a little shy. He had spent his whole life with just his mother, never knowing what it meant to have a father. But children had strong instincts. Leo could feel something from David, a deep, undeniable bond, a connection that had existed before they had even met. And maybe that moment at the company when he had first called David Daddy, that had been fate's way of bringing them together again. Mornings with Leo, taking his son to school. For the first time in his life, David Sterling personally took his son to school. No chauffeur, no bodyguards, just the two of them. Leo held his hand tightly, chattering nonstop about preschool, his friends, his favorite teacher, the games they played. David listened to every word, feeling his heart soften with each innocent story. When they arrived at the school gate, Leo suddenly stopped and looked up at him hesitantly. "Bako, John Kong, will you pick me up?" David froze. Such a simple question. But it felt like a dagger straight to his heart. He had already missed too much. How could he ever let his son grow up without a father again? Kneeling down, he gently ruffled Leo's hair. "Of course, I will always pick you up." Leo beamed, flashing a bright, carefree smile before running into his classroom. David stood there for a long time, watching his son's small figure disappear into the school. For the first time, he felt a warmth in his chest unlike anything he had ever known. Evening chess games, a father-son bond. That night, David led Leo into his study, a room that had always been reserved for work. But today, instead of documents and deals, he set up a chessboard. "Do you want to learn how to play?" he asked. Leo tilted his head, thinking for a moment before nodding excitedly. David patiently explained the moves, teaching his son how to strategize, how to think ahead. Leo listened intently, his small brows furrowing in concentration. But every time he lost, he pouted, puffing up his cheeks in frustration. And David couldn't help but chuckle. "Ba man qua, kong kong dang noi." David smiled, gently patting the boy's head. "That's okay. Keep trying. One day, you'll beat me." Leo pressed his lips together in determination, ready to play again. And just like that, he became completely immersed in the game. Without realizing that with every move, he was growing closer to the father he had never known. A weekend at the park. One quiet afternoon, David took Leo to the park. This time, he wasn't the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He was simply a father. Leo clutched a soccer ball in his tiny hands, eyes sparkling. Ba oi, bako biedja bongkong? David raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at his lips. What do you think? Leo blinked, then burst into laughter. I don't think so. I'll teach you. David let out a deep, amused laugh before scooping Leo up effortlessly. Then let's see what you've got, little man. He set Leo down and the two began their friendly match. Leo giggled as he tried to dribble past David. But David effortlessly blocked every attempt. Bachoy jianqua, Leo huffed. David shrugged playfully. Winning isn't that easy, kiddo. But then, Leo suddenly ran up and wrapped his small arms around David's leg, looking up at him with pure happiness. And just like that, something broke inside David. All his life, he had believed that power and wealth were the ultimate goals. But now in this moment, he realized that true happiness was far simpler. It was this: a quiet afternoon, a little boy who called him Ba. He knelt down and pulled Leo into a tight embrace, his arms wrapping securely around his son's small frame. I love you, Leo. Leo snuggled into him, his tiny voice whispering, Kung Kung Yuba. I love you too, Daddy. And in that moment, David knew he would never let his son go again. That night, Lila stood quietly at the doorway, watching the living room. David sat on the sofa, a book in his hands, while Leo slept soundly beside him, curled up against his father's side. The sight, it filled her with an unfamiliar warmth. Since when had she stopped wanting to leave? Since when had she started believing that this might really be her family? She still couldn't remember the past, but she no longer rejected it. Taking a deep breath, Lila clenched her hands at her sides. She was ready, ready to uncover the memories she had lost. 8. A family reunited. 6 months had passed since she moved back into the house. Tonight, the rain pounded heavily against the glass windows. In the warmth of the living room, Lila sat on the sofa, staring blankly at the stormy sky outside. And now, with the truth slowly unraveling before her, she could no longer deny it. David hadn't been lying. She was Elise Sterling, the woman who had once been wrapped in his love, the wife who had once vowed to stay by his side forever. But if that was true, then why couldn't she remember everything? Why did the images flash through her mind in broken fragments, never quite coming together? That night, Elise dreamed. She was standing on a ship surrounded by the vast, endless ocean. The sea breeze swept through her hair, but she didn't feel cold, because she was in the arms of a man with deep, piercing eyes, a man whose smile held her entire world. Do you know why I love you, Elise? She let out a soft laugh, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. Why? David leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Because you are the only light in my life. Elise froze. Why was she dreaming about this? No, this wasn't just a dream. This was a memory. And in that instant, it all came flooding back like a tidal wave. She remembered his laughter, his warm embraces, the nights they spent watching the stars together, the way he used to carry her on his back when she complained about being tired. She remembered their wedding night, his whispered words of love against her skin. She remembered the way they had once planned their future. A home filled with love, children's laughter echoing through the halls. Everything was so clear. She had found herself again. Elise jolted awake. Her breathing was ragged, her heart racing. She remembered everything. Without a second thought, she leaped out of bed, her bare feet gliding across the cold floor. David was standing in his study, gazing at their wedding photo with distant eyes. Hearing footsteps, he turned around and froze. Elise stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Slowly, she stepped closer, placing a trembling hand over his heart. David, just that single word. and his entire world shattered. He didn't move. He didn't speak, as if afraid that this moment would disappear if he so much as blinked. Elise smiled through her tears, her voice breaking. I remember. Her breath hitched. I remember everything. I remember you. In that instant, David couldn't hold back anymore. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it was as if he never wanted to let go again. Elise, you're really back. His voice was hoarse, his hands shaking as they clung to her. For 5 long years, he had waited for this moment. And now, finally, she had come home the next morning. At sunrise, Elise quietly stepped into Leo's bedroom. Her little boy was still fast asleep, his small hands clutching the teddy bear that David had bought for him. Sitting beside him, she gently stroked his hair. She remembered, and she now knew without a doubt. Leo was the most precious gift of love between her and David, their son. The day she discovered she was pregnant, she had been terrified. She had barely known who she was, let alone how to raise a child. She had feared the unknown, feared the future, feared the weight of responsibility. But now she knew. Leo was a miracle. The beautiful proof that no matter how much time had passed, no matter how much they had lost, love had never abandoned them. That morning, David stepped into the room and saw Elise holding Leo close in her arms. He walked forward slowly, lowering himself to sit beside them. Elise looked up, emotion shimmering in her eyes. David, you missed the first years of his life. Her voice trembled with lingering sorrow. David gently squeezed her hand, his gaze filled with quiet regret. But I won't miss another second. Leo stirred awake, rubbing his sleepy eyes before flashing them a bright, toothy grin. Daddy, Mommy said you're playing soccer with me today. David chuckled, pulling his son into a tight embrace. Of course, little man. Elise watched them, warmth blooming in her chest. After all the pain, the loss, the years spent apart, their family had finally found its way back to each other. No more heartbreak, no more separation, only love, joy, and a future full of endless possibilities. 9. A love that never faded. For 5 years, David Sterling had appeared in the media as a cold, untouchable figure, a powerful yet solitary CEO. No one dared to mention his pain because everyone knew. He had lost his wife in a tragic accident. But today, the entire business world and media landscape erupted in shock when Sterling Enterprises made an official announcement. Chairman David Sterling has found his wife, who was presumed missing 5 years ago. And not only that, he had a 4-year-old son. The news spread like wildfire. Journalists scrambled for details. Elise, now Lila, suddenly became the center of public attention. But she was no longer the lost, struggling woman who had once wandered through life without a past. She had endured pain. She had raised her son alone. She had fought through loss and survived. And now, she was stronger than ever. Because this time, she wasn't alone. This time, David would never let her go again. Their second wedding. 1 month later, they remarried. But this time, there were no extravagant parties with thousands of elite guests, no grand performances, no blinding lights or flashing cameras. This wedding was intimate, just family, just close friends, just the people who truly loved them. Lila walked down the grassy aisle in a pure white dress, simple, yet breathtakingly beautiful. Each step she took brought her closer to the man waiting at the altar. David stood there in a sleek black suit, his eyes never leaving her for a second. His heart pounded harder than ever. The first time they married, he thought he had found ultimate happiness. But this time, he understood that true happiness came from cherishing what you almost lost. They had suffered. They had been torn apart. They had endured unspeakable pain. But now, they had found their way back to each other, and David vowed he would love her twice, 3 times as much to make up for the years they had lost. When Elise finally stood before him, their eyes met. And in that moment, no words were needed. They understood each other completely. David leaned in slightly, his voice a hushed whisper. Are you ready? Elise's lips trembled as she nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I've been ready for a long time. The officiant smiled and began reciting the vows. David took her hands, holding them firmly. I, David Sterling, vow to love you, protect you, and never let you go again. Elise inhaled shakily, her voice quivering. And I, Elise, vow to stay by your side, cherish our love, and never let us lose each other again. As soon as the final words were spoken, the crowd erupted into applause, and David pulled her into a deep, passionate kiss. Their love had been tested, their bond had been broken, then rebuilt. But now, it was stronger than ever. And this time, it would last forever, a complete family once more. It wasn't just Elise and David who had found happiness again. There was one more person whose life had changed, Elise's adoptive mother. From the moment they arrived in New York, David had ensured she received the best medical care. A disease that once threatened to take her life had been caught just in time. Now she sat among the wedding guests, watching Elise in her wedding gown, her eyes brimming with joyful tears. For years she had worried for the daughter she had raised. She had watched Elise struggle to raise Leo alone, burdened by a grief she couldn't even remember. But now, she could finally breathe easy. Elise had found herself again, and most importantly, she knew her daughter would be loved completely, a new beginning. After the ceremony, David held Elise's hand as they stepped outside, with Leo's tiny fingers clasped tightly between theirs. The golden hues of sunset bathed the garden where their vows had been exchanged. Leo looked up at them, eyes gleaming with happiness. Mama, Daddy, does this mean we'll always be together now? David bent down, lifting his son effortlessly into his arms. He pressed a kiss to Leo's forehead, his voice firm and certain. Yes, nothing will ever separate us again. Elise nodded, wrapping her arms around them both. Our family is finally whole. And this time, nothing could tear them apart. They had learned to cherish each other, to love each other even more, to make up for the years they had lost. They had found each other, not just once but twice, and this time it was forever. The truth about love. True love never fades. Not even through trials, time, or suffering. If two souls are meant to be together, they will always find their way back to each other. But more than that, love is about never giving up on the ones who matter. Happiness isn't just about finding one another. It's about cherishing, understanding, and making up for the moments lost. A family isn't just defined by blood. It is made of the people who love you unconditionally, the ones who will never leave no matter what happens. Thank you for following this heartfelt stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.